In this video, we're going to be breaking down how everyone, even you, can become Grandmaster incredibly quickly if you incorporate these 3 things. So if you've been wanting to climb in Overwatch, look no further. We're going to break it all down. But do me a huge solid and check me out live on stream. We're going to be doing some coaching and then some unranked to Grandmaster with Genji only. So check it out right now and let's get into it. Now, the first most important thing that you need in order to climb to Grandmaster is game sense. This is one of the pillars of Overwatch, and a lot of people like to throw this term around, but it's a bit confusing. Like, what does game sense even mean, and how do you get good game sense? Now, there's several aspects to game sense, but overall, it's your understanding of the game and how you apply that knowledge throughout the course of you playing. And this could be done with a lot of things, like what is your understanding of a cooldown? Do you know when a Kiriko is going to get her Suzu back? Or do you know when a Genji is going to be able to have his deflect back after he uses it? Now, you don't have to be perfect with cooldown understanding. You just have to know generally when they will have it so that you don't push someone that has a cooldown that you think they don't, or vice versa. And it's incredibly important that you try to get better and better at tracking these cooldowns and playing more or less aggressively depending on what cooldowns are out or what cooldowns people have. Now, the next stage of this is ult tracking, and it's super important to track ultimates because your ult could get completely countered. I can't tell you how many times a Kiriko has rushed right into a Reinhardt to get her whole team shattered, but a smart Kiriko can track the enemy Reinhardt shatter, start the rush, but then instantly prep a Suzu so that when you do get shattered, you're all right back up. And you could even do it reactionarily, which is a mechanical thing. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the idea here is that you not only know that there's an ultimate that you have to play around because you tracked that ultimate, but you have a means to play around it by using your cooldowns or your ultimates as well. Now, here's the thing. It's very hard to try to track every single ultimate on the enemy team, right? If enemies haven't used their ultimate for many fights, it's obvious, hey, they got their ultimate, right? And that's something that you should also track, but if you want to get more specific, try to track your direct ultimate counter or matchup. If they are your same character, you should be able to track them relatively easily because you have a point of reference. And if you are someone that wants to get your ultimate off, but there's another ultimate that can stop you, that's something that's important to very diligently track. Like if you're a Genji, you should be diligently tracking the enemy Zenyatta. How much damage is he doing? How alive has he been? And you can make a rough estimate of whether or not he has his ultimate or not. Another aspect of game sense is the idea of strategy as far as giving or taking space. And you might be thinking, isn't this just a tanking term? But no, it's not. It's a all-person term. Understand that when you have advantage, you should be pushing up more aggressively, taking more space. There's less health, less damage, less cooldowns on the enemy team. So you should be playing aggressive relative to that. And when you're at a disadvantage, you should be playing more passive relative to that. And you might think that this is a pretty basic idea, but it's really not, because not even Masters players give and take space properly. A lot of times it takes a very long time before anyone pushes up aggressively at all, post a pick or post an advantage. And oftentimes players will stand and fight, stand their ground, even when they are down in cooldowns, down or with no ultimates, or down in people. And it's really important that this is a push and pull, a give and take. And when you have advantage, people, health, damage, numbers, ultimates, cooldowns, that's when you want to force a team fight. And when you're low on these things, you want to delay a team fight and back up and force an opponent to either use cooldowns to get to you or overextend to get to you, because it would mean that some of them are going to leave behind some of their teammates that don't have the same amount of mobility. Now, the next thing that you have to master to finish off game sense is matchup understanding. Now, every single character that you could be playing has good and bad matchups, and some of them are pretty obvious. Some of them are like, oh, yeah, I'm a Zen. A bad matchup for me is a Tracer, because that thing can kill me. But you also have to understand, how do you play against your bad matchups? Because it's not as simple as just to say, every time I go up against a bad matchup, I swap off, because I promise you, if that's the case, you're going to just start swapping off all the time. Like, as a perfect example, when I grind Zen, I have people try to play characters that can counter me all the time, and I have to adjust my positioning, play more reserve, play farther away, track their position, and try to overcome a lot of my bad matchups, or else I would just be swapping. Same thing with Doom. Every time I pop off on Doom, the opponent is going to go Orisa almost every single time. Sometimes they rock a Sombra as well. And the thing is, even if I am a flexible player and capable of swapping off, it's in your best interest to learn how to make it as hard as possible for even your bad matchups to perform so that they overplay into you or overswap into you, or you make it very, very hard for them to get you to swap off in the first place because you still know how to play your bad matchups. And realize that every single character has an effective range and an effective strategy. Just because there's an enemy that technically has a better matchup on paper, you can do things like set up 2v1s, set up optimal ranges, or never fully engage in a 1v1 to leverage these matchups and make them more equalized. Now, something that directly comes after game sense, like you got the knowledge of the cooldowns, the giving space, the understanding, the matchups. Now we move on to mechanical skill, which is incredibly important as well. And basically mechanics is just your ability to perform X amount of actions at X speed. How good are you at hitting a shot in a certain time frame? How consistent are you at hitting your abilities in a small window? And this could be things like your aim, your raw aim, and it could be hit scan weapons like Cassidy, or maybe even an honest scoped in or something like that. But it could also be projectile like Zen Orb, a number of different abilities, or even characters like Hanzo. It could also be abilities as well, specific abilities, and a lot of them can be more or less difficult to hit. An honest sleep dart can be very, very hard. A nade can be very, very hard. Some abilities like a Junker Queen's throwing knife can be hard to learn and hard to master, but through repetition you get better at your mechanics over time. Now, something that is important that you need to understand about mechanics in general is that your time to kill directly ties into your game sense, and you need to apply your mechanical skill and tie it to your game sense if you want to succeed. And here's what I mean. Matchups only assume that both players play about the same mechanical skill. And this is very, very important because that means that there is wiggle room for your own individual mechanics to overperform in the matchup. And what I mean by that is you have to start thinking about matchups a little bit more like percentages, where instead of just one character beats another, like in a rock, paper, scissors, you think about characters having an advantage or disadvantage slightly based on extra percentage. So let's say a Tracer is a 60% or 65% to win against a Zen. That doesn't mean it's 100%, and a Zen that is more mechanically competent can 100% destroy a Tracer. And that's the wiggle room that you need to understand. You need to be realistic with your mechanical skill. Understand where you can leverage the idea that you are unfavored in a matchup, but still use your mechanical skill to power through. And this is one of the things that you really need to understand about pushing an advantage or pushing a disadvantage or anything like that. If you are going at like a weakened target, let's say on paper, the target has low cooldowns, they're isolated, they're vulnerable, and you push them, but your mechanical skill is terrible. The game sense, the aspect where you analyze the game and decided to push, those things were all correct, but the play might have gone wrong because either your opponent had above average mechanical skill or you had below average mechanical skill. It's about how consistent you are in a certain time frame with your mechanics, your damage, your abilities, whatever the case may be. And what this means is the flip side is also true. If you have above average mechanical skill, you can push a bad situation or you can survive in a bad situation. One of the greatest examples I like to showcase this is in the Hanzo v Tracer mirror, where when a player has truly amazing mechanics on Hanzo, the lower and lower you get that Hanzo's health on Tracer, you think you're more and more advantaged. But the longer you've been engaging that Hanzo, the less and less abilities that you have because you've wasted a lot of your cooldowns like your blinks, and the more and more predictable you become. And a great Hanzo can take advantage of that. So while on paper, you're like, oh, the Hanzo's 1 HP. My game sense says push, I should push. It's strategically the right play. Mechanics can play a vital role in whether or not the matchup is winnable, pushable, and understanding and respecting the mechanical skill of the opponent and understanding and being realistic about the mechanical skill that you have is the way that you're going to be able to succeed. And of course, your mechanics are a constant work in progress. They're going to get better over time the longer and longer you play. Now, last up, we got to talk about positioning. And positioning is, I would say, the last pillar. And it's so closely tied to game sense and mechanical skill because positioning are the places that you play on the map. Where do you play to be efficient? Where do you play to deal more damage, be more consistent, have more consistent heals, more consistent ability use, while also being more survivable? stable and less likely to die. And this is so important because it's tied directly to both your mechanical skill and your game sense. And the reason that is, first off, let's talk about game sense. If you are playing Zenyatta, right, and you're up against characters that can push you, can dive you, can flank you, your position is going to be way different than up against characters that can only poke from behind their tank. One requires you to play far safer, either closer to your team, closer to peel, or at a distance from any flank angle, and the other one can allow you to play more liberally, more up front. And it's always different depending on a million different factors. Maybe the enemy is playing a composition that might actually threaten you, or a character that might threaten you, but that person is not specifically going for you, so you can adapt over time. And this is all tied to your game sense. But another factor is your mechanical skill, and this is on every single character. How survivable are you when you add in your mechanical skill into account? How confident are you in your ability to deny the enemy's space using your own abilities, using your own damage? And when we talk about aggressive positioning or aggressive plays, some amount of plays can be gone for with a higher mechanical skill or a certain level, and shouldn't be gone for with a lower level of mechanical skill. And it's not just about what your peak mechanics are, it's what your average mechanics are, what's consistent to you. So basically what I'm saying is that positioning is directly tied into not only your understanding of the game, and that's going to vary how you move and how you change your position throughout the course of the round, but also how reliable and consistent your mechanical skill is, and how that ties into the matchups that you could be facing depending on where you're positioned. So everything ties together to this, and this is basically everything that you need to master on Overwatch. One by one, fundamentally, cooldowns, giving space, matchups, your mechanics, your aim, your ability-based consistency, your time to kill, and your ultimate-based consistency, where you can practice your ultimates over time. You can practice them very specifically in like a basically workshop mode if you wanted to get better at blades, want to get better at pulse bumps, primal rages, the list goes on and on. But positioning is something that is very tied to game sense and mechanical skill, and it's something that you have to constantly be tweaking and tuning. Because over the course of a match, over the course of a team fight even, your positioning should always be changing because the factors on the battlefield change. Someone uses an ability and they don't have it for 12 seconds, maybe you can move a little bit closer, a little bit more forward. Maybe the Genji is dead now, so now you're more free to push up aggressively. Maybe the Genji wrapped to the right pillar, and now you don't necessarily know if he could pivot to you, so then your position should pull back. Every single thing that happens needs to address your positioning, and when we tie this into game sense, when we tie this into cooldown tracking and ult tracking, it can directly dictate your positioning. And when we tie in your mechanical skill versus the enemy team mechanical skill, if the Genji jumps on you, how fast are they going to kill you? Can you survive? Do you have time to hit your shots? Are you hitting your shots? These are things that you have to judge, because if I'm up against a really mediocre player, someone that doesn't kill me very quickly, has a lower time to kill, I can be more liberal with my positioning. But if I get deleted the second I'm out of position, then I need to play far more passive, even if it's at the cost of my impact, my value, my playmaking potential. And this is very important that you need to understand if you really want to succeed and you want to climb, because your optimal position doesn't always stay the same, not against the same picks, not against the same players, and definitely not when you're playing the same character. So this is really important, and I think that if you start to adopt these things, understand these things, and even use this as a checklist when you're going through and looking at your own VODs, when you want to do self-VOD reviews and learn, these are the things that you need to be considering and thinking about. If you go for a play and you're like, damn, that person had their ability and I didn't even know that, I didn't even think about it, or damn, this play went wrong because that person still had that ultimate and I didn't even know they had that ultimate, or else I wouldn't have went for this play, or wow, I should have killed that person because that person was low HP and I pushed them, but they hit an insane shot on me and I completely whiffed. These are the things that you need to evaluate, so then you really know what your weaknesses are. Now, that being said, if you want some more private coaching instead, you can definitely check me out on my Patreon for some private coaching in the links down below. But check me out on stream right now doing some coaching and GM, or rather unranked to GM with Genji only. But thank you so much for coming by. I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.